Happy Devils Tuesday. This is At the Point, talking NHL. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Bruce Zeman. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. As I'm coming to you live from American Whiskey. In about a couple hours, the Devils will take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hello, Bruce. How you feeling
Sam,
today?
great to be with you once again. Looks like you're in a great location, and as you mentioned, the Devils will be taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs later this evening, and hopefully we have a better effort and outcome than we did in their most recent game against the Avalanche.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's just Jekyll and Hyde for your New Jersey Devils. They have been really just feast or famine. Can't really explain why these losses have to be shutouts. I can't explain it. I think this is 6 now. Is it 6 shutouts right now
I think
for the
so.
New Jersey Devils?
And you're right. It's either feast or famine, and they just got nothing going in that game against the Avalanche. So hopefully tonight, against a team with a pretty high-powered offense, we'll see what they're able to do.
Yeah, so speaking of which, the Avalanche, the Devils lost to the other night. The Avalanche and the San Jose Sharks made a trade a couple days ago. Let's talk about this trade because, I have some thoughts about it because it involves 2 goaltenders.
Yeah, it certainly does. The Avalanche acquired Mackenzie Blackwood from the Sharks, along with forward Giovanni Smith and a 5th-round pick in 2027. And in return, the Sharks received goaltender Alexander Georgiev, forward Nikolai Kovalenko, a 5th-round pick in 2025, and a 2nd-round pick in 2026. And if you look at this trade, Sam, at the beginning of the season, the Colorado Avalanche were considered contenders, and they just were not getting the goaltending that their upper management felt that they should, so they pulled the trigger on this. And for Mackenzie Blackwood, who his record, I believe, is 6-9-3, which isn't that great, but his save percentage is up there. And so for the Avalanche, they certainly feel this is an upgrade. And if you recall, they also recently just got Scott Wedgwood, who we know from the Devils. So they've completely revamped their goaltending tandem in the hopes that this can get them deep into the playoffs.
Maybe they like former New Jersey Devils with the last name Wood in it, like Miles Wood, Blackwood, and Wedgwood. Or is that a coincidence, or that's just something that, they really do like?
I'm not really sure, but I'll tell you, this is a trade that hopefully will get Colorado going. I mean, like the Nashville Predators, Colorado is a team that's had kind of a disappointing start to the season. And, again, their upper management really felt that they needed to do something. And, as we both know, goaltenders come at a premium. And this is something that they hope is going to shake things up because you're getting to the point in the season where you've got to decide which way you're headed.
Yeah. Well, is this going to have an effect during NHL trade deadline with this trade? I mean, did the Colorado Avalanche really need to make this trade?
Well, they apparently thought that they did. Both of their goaltenders prior to this were, by their own admission, not having a great season, and I guess they kind of figured they would turn it around at some point, but one of the roles of a general manager is to make that decision for the team. I mean, all of us, if we're playing, are going to think that we're going to turn it around at some point. To me, the downside in this trade for Colorado is Nikolai Kovalenko. I know that they needed a goaltender, but Kovalenko is a player that really provided Colorado with some, what a lot of people consider to be depth scoring. He's only got 8 points in 28 games, but he seemed to have a lot of potential. I mean, I know the Avalanche, from some of the folks I talked to, are high on him. and they gave him up. But again, goaltending wins championships. So if this is able to get them deep into the playoffs, then it's a win.
It's funny because the Colorado Avalanche had Kemper in net when they won the Stanley Cup, and then they did pick up what's the one that just got traded? I always call him Georgie V. I never knew how to really pronounce his name, but anyway, Gorgiev. They were banking on him, and it just simply didn't work out. But Mackenzie Blackwood, that's what I just don't understand. I mean, he has potential. I'll give him that best, but he certainly hasn't lived up to it because of the injuries and, certain issues or whatnot. Some of it was his fault. Some of it was not. Another change of scenery for him. I just don't know. Are they banking on that hopefully Wedgwood or Blackwood would get hot?
I think they might have. I mean, if you want to take a look at some of Blackwood's stats, 19 games. Like I said, his record, I believe, is 6-9-3, but he's got a .911 save percentage and a 3.00 goals against average on a team that's really not very good. And so, he did shut out the Devils. That's Wedgwood.
No, it's both.
Thank you. My brain is scrambled. We're talking about so many Devils goalies, right?
Yeah.
But I think that for him, this is really kind of a put up or shut up move because this is his third team.
Third team in 3 years.
So he's really got to put some numbers up, and it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do.
Yeah. Well, we shall see.
But I do think, Sam, that it's going to do something to the goalie market come trade deadline time because goalies come at a premium, and it's going to be interesting to see who else gets moved.
Yeah, and you remember on trade deadline whether Markstrom was going to get traded. It was a big controversy up in Calgary. It's just the way they handled it. Eventually, he did get traded, but that was during the offseason. But teams are going to ask for a lot for good goaltenders. Now, here's another trade I don't understand, and it's the Trouba trade. I didn't think any team in the NHL would want to absorb that contract, like the Ducks.
Well, apparently the Ducks were interested in Jacob Trouba last summer. And without getting into a long story, Jacob Trouba has some personal stuff with his wife being a doctor, I believe, in the New York area, and he didn't want to move to a new location until she finished some part of her education or something to do with her career. Residency, yeah, thank you. And so, but they had talked about going to Anaheim, but he decided to stay with New York and use the provisions that are, that he's earned in his contract and stay there. But if you look at Jacob Trouba, what I think the Ducks and Pat Verbeek are looking at is the fact that he's been an NHL captain and he's been an effective player, and they were high on him. And I was reading an article earlier today that the Ducks GM Pat Verbeek thinks that they're a lot closer to contending than a lot of other folks do. So they pulled the trigger on this trade, and the Ducks were one of the teams that could take on a contract like that.
I guess it has to be the right situation, and the New York Rangers got lucky. Simply got lucky by making this trade. And think about the Gudas Trouba pairing, if they're ever paired together.
That would be great. And for Trouba, for fans that are wondering where the money falls with this, Jacob Trouba has 1 year remaining on a 7-year, $56 million contract, $8 million AAV that he signed with the Rangers back in 2019 after he came to the team from the Jets. So he's only 30 years old. I don't know why. Whenever I think about him, I think he's older than that for some reason. But he's 30, so he's still in his prime. Nearing the end of his prime, but he's still in his prime. And for the Ducks, I mean, are they going to sign him to some type of, bridge deal, a 2 or 3 year deal, and see if he can help them rebuild? I mean, I think he's going to get a chance to play some significant minutes in Anaheim and mentor their younger players.
Well, most definitely. And, I mean, on the personal side, I mean, is his wife going to be moving her residency out to L.A.?
I'm not really sure, but, what folks have to remember, and I've said this so many times, people that listen to this podcast, I got a message the other day on my Facebook page. You say all the time that this is a business. Well, it is a business, and that's what folks have to remember. I mean, I think the people that run these teams, they love hockey and they think it's a great sport, but it's about making money, and that's literally the only thing that they care about. That's what it comes down to, because if the seats are full, they're making money. And just to use a football analogy, Sam, you're a big sports fan. For years, the New York Giants were absolutely, well, they're not great now either, but they were terrible. And the team was making so much money. There was, a 75-year wait list, so there was no incentive for them to make the team better. They're making money anyway.
Yep.
But I think that Jacob Trouba exercised the rights that he had earned in his contract to not be traded. And then basically from one of my Ranger insider friends, they basically told him that you're either going to agree to this trade or we're going to scratch you or put you on waivers, which to a veteran like him is probably not the best way to handle this. But again, it's one of those things where it kind of got leaked and you wonder where that came from, right?
Yeah.
But, he's going to play some significant minutes. And, the Rangers' Chris Drury is trying to shake things up over there because they've got some issues. I mean, they did just sign Shesterkin, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But, they lost to the Blackhawks, I believe it was last night, 2-1. They did not look good. And, at what point, I guess my question, would be, what do the Rangers do next?
That's a good question. I mean, they got the Shesterkin deal done. It wasn't like 14 or 15 million or the exaggeration deals that we're seeing. The fans were, spewing on social media and on the message boards. They got their goaltender for the next 8 years. Now they're going to build around him. I still think there's going to be more deals done. Now, Kaapo Kakko's name has been, in the mix. The two draft picks, I mean, do they trade those two? I mean, they've got older players like Kreider, which, has been rumored to go. What direction do they take?
That's a tough question. And again, looking up and down their roster, there are some things that haven't fallen the right way for them. They've had stretches where they've just not played well. I mean, you and I witnessed the game against the Devils the other night where they lost 5-1. They just did not look, to me, they didn't look like they were in sync at all. But I will say this. Let me just put this out there. I personally would not trade Chris Kreider because power forwards like that do not grow on trees.
Yeah.
But, if I don't know what you do if you're their GM. I mean, unless there's some stuff going on in the room that we don't know about. I mean, they're in a tough situation because they're the team that a lot of people picked to win the Metropolitan Conference. You and I talked about that, and we had them 1-2 or 2-1. I can't remember, but I mean, right now they're fighting for that wild card.
Yeah, I mean, they're fighting for that wild card, and again, I'm not understanding where the impatience is coming from. I mean, when the Rangers started the season this year, they were hot. They were a top team. No issues. But we talked to Chico Resch the other day, and his thoughts were, well, the goaltending carried them. Their record was really their goaltending. Now that the goaltending came back to earth, now we're seeing the Rangers losing a lot. And maybe their goaltending was covering up all the issues, but GM Chris Drury was already on it. He should know. And, I don't think this is a panic move. I think it was one of these, it's one of these things, Bruce, that sometimes, whether you're GM or you're a boss at some company or whatnot, that sometimes you need to you can predict something's about to happen. The bottom is going to drop, but you can't make the moves because it hasn't happened yet. And now instantly, when it does happen, now you're reactive. So I don't think this is just a knee-jerk reaction. I think Chris Drury knew during the playoffs last season they were not a cup contending team. They were a good team to get into the playoffs. They were a tough team to play in the playoffs. But the reality is the Florida Panthers showed them who was boss. And, again, with a couple lucky plays, the referees kind of chipping in as well. They got a couple games there against the Panthers. But the reality is the New York Rangers, they weren't as good as what a lot of people thought they were.
Well, you got to remember, Sam, too, they won the President's Trophy last year for having the best record in the league. They went to the Eastern Conference Final. But right now they're fourth in the Metro Division. They hold the wild card. But it seems that they're, struggling to hold on to that. There was a lot of hype about this team. And to make a comparison, let's take a look at the Devils last year. At the beginning of last season, there were people, and I was one of them, that had them picked to go to the Stanley Cup Final. And they just had just a terrible year all around. So is the hype impacting that team? Are they just more hyped than they are good? I don't know. But, that's a tough situation for Chris Drury to be in because he's either going to make another move, and we talked about this in one of our other podcasts. I think Peter Laviolette, I think his job is safe. But it remains to be seen what happens if you keep having losses. There doesn't seem to be a lot of you can only take positives, so many positives out of losses. And some of the games that they've had this year, they just have not looked good.
Have not looked good. And, and I've always felt that the Rangers play better when they're pissed off. I know that's kind of cliche, but when they're just mucking it up and being a nuisance and a distraction, they seem to just play better. And I think that's where the Matt Rempe phenomenon last season came into play. Anytime they put him out there, the fans were going wild about Rempe. Look, Rempe, skill-wise, I don't know if he belongs in the NHL, but what the element that he brought was he was a distraction. He was a disruptor. And I think the Rangers play much, much better when they are disrupting than just trying to, outskill and, outgun their opponents. That's just my opinion, of course. But I just find that there's just no flair this season. Like Jacob Trouba, Kreider, all of them, they just didn't have that fire. They seem unenthused. The way they're uninspiring hockey. That's how I could describe how they're playing this year.
I think you're right about that. And, going back to the Rempe thing, that's also a marketing tool. It really is. It's going to put people in the seats because there's all this, hype about them and what's going to happen when they play the Devils and some of the other teams and what's he going to do now and everything. It's also marketing. But, apparently their GM felt that he needed to do something, and I don't think it's a knee-jerk reaction either. I think they were ready to move on from Jacob Trouba last year. Maybe there were some other things that they didn't like. There was some talk. I think Peter Laviolette said that they wanted a new direction. Maybe that's a leadership thing. I don't know. But the Ducks like his leadership, and we'll see what comes out of this. But I'll throw this out to you. What do you do if you make this trade and there is no change? What's next? Do you make a big move to move one of your forwards? Because I'll tell you what, I would love to see Chris Kreider on the Devils. I've always liked him as a player. He's one of those power forwards, and I think if he got moved, I think he'd be pretty pissed off. Like you said, I think he'd have a pretty big chip on his shoulder and probably, have a great rest of the season. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right, switching topics. Now, right now, I know we're a quarter mark through the season right now. A little bit over, a little bit less, depending on who you are. The wild card. And this starts to get very interesting because there are a lot of teams on the bubble in the beginning of the season. And then it starts to kind of thin out. And then in some years, you have competitive races where it's just neck and neck. Right now, as it stands, in the Eastern Conference, in the Atlantic Division, you have Florida, Toronto, Boston, top three. Metropolitan Division, the Washington Capitals, New Jersey Devils, and the Carolina Hurricanes. In the wild card spot right now, you have the Tampa Bay Lightning with 30 points. The New York Rangers somehow holding on to that wild card spot at 29 points. And just rounding, let's say, the top 10, top 12, the Islanders, the Flyers, the Penguins, and the Columbus Blue Jackets and Ottawa Senators, let's just say. Who do you think is going to take those two spots in the Eastern Conference?
At the beginning of the year, you and I had the Rangers, the Devils, and the Carolina Hurricanes as taking, 1, 2, 3 in the Metropolitan Division. And I think we had Florida, Toronto, and Boston in the Atlantic. So the surprise to me so far in the Metropolitan Conference has been the Capitals, and in the Atlantic, I'm a little bit surprised at how well Toronto has done, and like we said, I'm a little bit surprised that Tampa Bay and the Rangers aren't higher. I kind of think if Tampa Bay gets some things to fall in the right direction, the same thing for the Rangers. I think those two teams are going to hop up a little bit. The team that I think is going to sneak in to the wild card in the Eastern Conference is going to be the Philadelphia Flyers. And I think if I had to pick a second wild card team, I might go with the Islanders. Because I think that they always seem to be just good enough to get in. I don't really like Pittsburgh or the Blue Jackets or Ottawa or any of the teams really under them. So I guess if I had to pick, I would say the Flyers number 1 and the Islanders number 2.
So you're saying that the Lightning and Rangers would be out?
I guess I just didn't explain that correctly. So what I mean is I think in the Metropolitan Conference it's going to be, and I don't know what order this is going to be in, but I think Tampa Bay is going to get their stuff together. So let me say this. I think it's going to be, I didn't explain that well at all. Tampa Bay, New Jersey, Carolina, with the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals. The Rangers and the Capitals taking the wild card in the Eastern Conference.
Okay. Yeah, somehow the Islanders, they always seem to keep the hanging around and make it. And I don't know why, but isn't Lou and Patrick Watt not talking?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that. There's been reports about that. I don't think that's a good situation, but they both seem to be professionals, and maybe they'll be able to put their differences aside and make something happen there. They've got the basics. I don't think they're going to go far in the playoffs, but I think they might be just good enough to sneak in.
Yeah. Going to the Western Conference. In the Central, you have Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Dallas. Minnesota and Winnipeg getting off to a hot start this season. In the Pacific, as expected, the Vegas Golden Knights. The LA Kings are second. Canucks third. Holding the wild card spots are the Edmonton Oilers and Colorado, with Calgary, Seattle, and Utah, St. Louis outside looking in.
Well, This is a tough one because if you look at the Central Conference and over in the Western Conference, man, that is a powerhouse division of teams with Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Dallas. I think that's probably going to stay the way it is. Now, the Pacific, I think the Kings are really overachieving, especially with that injury to Drew Doughty. I think they've really kind of picked it up. But if you look at the teams that are holding the wild cards right now, Sam, you've got Edmonton and Colorado, two teams that we really expected to do great things. So I think they're going to move up. So if I had to pick the two wild card teams right now, I think it might be the Kings in Vancouver.
Interesting. I'm seeing Calgary. I don't think Seattle's going to make the playoffs.
No.
Although I do think that the Utah Hockey Club might be a nice story this season. I think they're going to be in it, and they'll be relevant on the last game of the season.
Well, you could be right. I mean, they've got Clayton Keller, their captain, who's a great player. I don't think they've got the depth or the horses to get that far. But I mean, the Western Conference has got so many like stories and subplots. And again, we talked about the Avalanche and if this big shakeup with their goaltenders is going to actually give them the jolt that they need to move up. But I mean, Edmonton the last couple of years has started slow and then they come on and win 30 games in a row or something like that. And so it'll really be interesting to see because as we talked about last year, there's going to be some good teams that don't make the playoffs in the West.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Western Conference is just the top 12 and 13 have a chance. Really have a chance. I mean, the St. Louis Blues, look at the changes. St. Louis Blues, I think that they might get a wild card spot just because of the coaching change. Remember how bad they were, and then suddenly Jim Montgomery's on board, and suddenly they started winning. Seattle Kraken, I don't think they're going to make it. Calgary Flames, I think they're going to be a nice story, just like Utah. But to overcome Colorado, Edmonton, Vancouver, LA, Vegas, and then Central with Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Dallas, I think that's going to be really hard. But right now we're at the quarter mark of the season, of the NHL season. I honestly think, actually, we're past the quarter mark just a little bit, maybe the 1/3 mark. But I'm thinking if there's a team that's going to make the playoffs, it's the last day of the season. It's the Utah Hockey Club. And boy, are they going to be exciting. And in that first round, because John Marino is coming back. They're going to get some horses back. And you never know. It's a new culture, new owner, new building, and they have nothing to lose. And when you play a team that has nothing to lose, they're going to be dangerous.
Well, they're the NHL's new big story.
Yep.
It would be a great story for them to do something in the postseason, and like you said, I think that would be a great story for the NHL. We'll see if it comes to fruition.
Yeah. And all right, so let's talk a little Devils because we're going to have Game Day Live on the top of the hour. Right now, I am your host Sam Wu here with Bruce Zeman as I am live from American Whiskey. Look at this place, Bruce. It is starting to pack up a little bit. 5:36 p.m. Eastern for a 7 o'clock game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's starting to get rowdy here, but it's going to get rowdy when Jacques Lemaire comes into town as he is to be inducted into the Ring of Honor at the Prudential Center. I believe it's January 22nd when the Devils take on the Boston Bruins. What are your thoughts about Jacques Lemaire? I talked about him on the Woo Report. I want to hear your memories and thoughts as he was the coach when you were with the Devils organization. Am I correct, Bruce?
He was. I remember meeting him his first day that he came there, and I went up to him and I thanked him for joining the team. I got to remember, I'm like an 18-year-old kid. I'm going up to this NHL legend and speaking with him. I said, I'm so excited that you're coming here because you're going to teach the team how to win. He is the man that changed the entire mindset of the organization, and he was an incredibly nice man. He was always very gracious to me, and you just saw we saw what he did. I mean, he was like a dad to those players, and he deserves all the accolades that he's given and is going to get, and he's the winningest coach in the team's history, 276, 166, and 10. In 7 seasons with the Devils. They won the Cup with Jock in 1995. For those that may not remember, he was hired as the first coach of the expansion Minnesota Wild, and then he returned to the Devils in 2009. He retired after the Devils lost the first round of the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs, but then returned in December 2010, replacing John McClain after the Devils started the season 9-22-2. And they went 29-17-3 after Jock took over, and they went on a 22-2 run. And he is just, to me, he is the reason that we've gotten to where we are. He started the greatness, and I mean, who can forget the neutral zone trap?
Yeah, the neutral zone trap always had bad press, always had the media just mad. I never understood that, other than it's not exciting hockey. But to be honest with you, Bruce, it depends who you talk to. I mean, that's kind of subjective. The media at the time was just like, oh, it's boring, there's nothing to cover, no excitement. But the reality is, it was exciting to the knowledgeable fan because it was always a chess match. When will the team make a mistake, and will the Devils capitalize? It's all about creating turnovers in the neutral zone. And, it's... Now, the clutching and grabbing back in those days, you could have done without. The red line was in place. I think the neutral zone trap. I mean, remember the series, the Stanley Cup Finals against the Red Wings. It was the neutral zone trap versus the left wing lock. It's like, which system is better? And I remember the governor during the parade was talking about the neutral zone trap as well. But Jacques Lemaire, I mean, he taught the game very well, and he was always a student of the game. And he taught the players, especially Martin Brodeur and Scott Stevens, how to play the game right. And Scott Stevens was reinvented under Lemaire into this defensive shutdown monster, which elevated him into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Most people don't remember he was an offensive defenseman, but when Jacques Lemaire came, he became a totally different player. He upped his game to a whole new level where it was like you're going to win every night type of mentality, that every year was the year you're going to win the cup. So, it was a totally different mindset than it is today. But that's what Jacques Lemaire brought to New Jersey and put New Jersey Devils on the map.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Jacques Lemaire made good players great players, and great players franchise icons. You're completely correct. You hit it right on the head with Marty and Scott. The way he transformed, they were already great players, but he made them icons, and just was responsible for the success that the franchise achieved. The biggest impact that he had on the team, in my opinion, because I was there when he got there. And I've also, I followed this team since they were the Kansas City Scouts way back when. I mean, I was only a little kid then, but I remember I had a Kansas City Scouts jersey when I was a little kid. And just what you said is exactly what he did. He made the team feel that they should win every night, which is essentially like the mindset that the Montreal Canadiens had.
And to buy into a system, remember, you had some offensively gifted players that had to buy into the system, like Scott Niedermayer. I mean, Scott Niedermayer was, look, I think he helped Scott Niedermayer on the defensive side and play the game right, because Scott Niedermayer was at a young age and coming into his own, and then Jacques Lemaire comes along, and then even I think also transformed Scott Niedermayer as well. Stéphane Richer, Claude Lemieux, all these players. And again, if it wasn't for a couple bounces, I think they could have advanced pretty far in the playoffs back in 97 and 98 with Jacques Lemaire. But it was unfortunate that the first round bounces, led to his dismissal. And Robbie Fautor came in just to, give, the Devils kind of more of a offensive mindset, which he did a heck of a job with the Albany River Rats. But, again, and also just remember who was on his staff, and I'm sure he's going to be there when Jacques Lemaire is honored, is Larry Robinson. I mean, Larry Robinson had a huge part, of that 95 Cup team, winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, having those two behind the bench, and the New Jersey Devils organization was very, very lucky at the time to just completely change the mindset after the Rangers won the Cup for the first time in 50-something years. Just remember what they had to, overcome.
Yeah, and the impact on the franchise is immeasurable. He just did so many things with the mindset and making those players into great players, and just setting the tone for what was to come. I think this is a great move for the team, and I'm excited for him because I have a lot of respect for Mr. Lemaire, and boy, what a special night that's going to be.
Absolutely, Bruce, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to get out of here, Bruce. I appreciate you coming on. It is getting livelier here at American Whiskey. I'm just going to go to the fan cam right now, just so everybody looking in. There's a lot of fans here. Everyone's drinking here at American Whiskey. I'm having some, let's see here, just to let you know, I'm having some fish and chips here at American Whiskey, something a little healthier. I don't know if it's healthier or not. But, yeah, we're going to have Game Day Live shortly. But, Bruce, thank you very much. And any final thoughts?
No, it's going to be a big night for Mr. Lemaire, and tonight's a big game for the Devils. And go Devils, and hopefully I'm going to be there with you at American Whiskey very soon, doing our podcast live with you there, and have some fish and chips.
Yeah. Fish and chips, fish tacos they got here. They've got ribs. They've got burgers. They've got calamari. They've got all sorts of stuff here at American Whiskey. So we'll see you on Thursday. Till next time, let's go Devils.